One bite can kill. Whose hand served the danger? Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I'm your host, Mr. Enigma. Share where you're watching from. It makes this community thrive. I can't wait to see your comments. Let's begin. If you've never watched Nero Wolfe eat dinner, let me give you the picture. It's a ritual, not a meal. Fritz sets the table with the precision of a surgeon. The courses arrive like movements in a symphony, and Wolfe sits in his throne-like chair with the gravity of a Roman emperor granting an audience. Interruptions are forbidden, frowned upon, or in my case, when I once sneezed, nearly punishable by exile. That's why the knock on the front door at 7:30, that Tuesday evening felt like blasphemy, was halfway through my own plate of lamb cutlets when Fritz shot me a look that said, "Answer it, but if this ruins my sauce, I'll haunt you after I die." Wolfe scowled but didn't speak. He never does with his mouth full. I went to the door and opened it to find a delivery boy in a white cap, holding a covered silver tray with both hands, like it was the crown jewels. "Special order for Mr. Nero Wolfe," he announced, reading from the slip tucked under the lid. I blinked. That's so. Funny, he doesn't usually order takeout during a 4-course dinner. The kid shrugged. "Address says here. Paid in advance. Instructions. Deliver hot, no delay." I took the tray, signed the slip just to get him off the porch, and closed the door. The thing was warm through the cloth. When I set it on the side table in the dining room, Fritz leaned over, frowning. "I did not order this." "Nor did I," Wolfe rumbled. He set down his fork and regarded the tray as if it were a bug crawling across his orchids. "Remove the cover." I lifted the lid, and the smell hit me first. Rich, complex, spiced in a way that prickled the back of my throat. On the plate was a carefully arranged dish, duck breast seared to a deep glaze, resting on a bed of braised fennel. It looked like something out of Le Gant Rouge's kitchen, though I'd never seen Fritz glare at food like it had insulted his ancestry. "This is not mine," Fritz said flatly, "and whoever cooked it is careless with the seasoning." Wolfe didn't touch it. He leaned forward, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing. Then, with deliberate care, he pushed the plate away. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Dispose of it." I raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No thanks, no nibble, no scolding about culinary crimes against duck?" "Dispose of it," he repeated. "With gloves. And do not, under any circumstances, allow Fritz to taste it. Now, I've seen Wolfe pass up plenty. Social invitations, phone calls, exercise, but never food. Not once. That was when I knew the plate was more than a prank. I carried it to the kitchen, slid it into a sealable tin, and locked it in the cold box Fritz kept for delicate ingredients. Fritz looked ready to murder me for contaminating his sanctum, but Wolfe's orders were gospel. When I came back, Wolfe had folded his napkin and was staring into space. "That's his version of alarm bells." "Okay," I said, "spill." "You smelled something." "Yes." His tone was clipped. "Bitter almond, faint but unmistakable. Coumarin, perhaps, or cyanogenic compounds, poison." I whistled low. "Somebody just sent you a poisoned entree like a fan letter." "Precisely." Wolfe shifted his bulk back in his chair. "A gesture, not a murder attempt. If one wished me dead, they would not dispatch duck flambé through a delivery boy." "This is theatre." "Well," I said, "whoever staged it has a twisted sense of hospitality." Fritz stood stiff, arms folded. "To tamper with food in this way is an obscenity." "It is blasphemy." Wolfe inclined his head. "Indeed. And obscenity, when thrust upon me, demands investigation." That was his way of saying the case had begun. I spent the rest of the evening tracing the delivery slip. The restaurant listed was real enough, a trendy place downtown called Maison Verdun. I phoned them, and after a few rounds of confusion, the maitre d' swore no such order had been placed through them. The signature on the slip was nonsense. Someone had forged the restaurant's name, paid cash at the door, and sent the tray with instructions to deliver to Wolfe. When I relayed that, Wolfe grunted. "Then the question is not who wished me poisoned, but who wished me unsettled." "There is a difference." "Yeah," I said. "One kills you. The other just ruins dinner." "Both are intolerable," he replied. By the next morning, the brownstone had lost its calm. Wolfe called Saul Panzer before I even had my second cup of coffee, instructing him to dig into Maison Verdun's clientele and staff. Fritz spent an hour scrubbing the kitchen, as though the contaminated tray had infected the very counters. And me, I went to the restaurant in person. The maitre d', a wiry fellow named Granger, swore up and down that nobody from his kitchen would dare send food unbidden, much less poisoned. But when I asked who might want to drag Wolfe's name into a stunt, his eyes flicked just once toward the back before he recovered. That told me there was something or someone worth checking. I poked around and found out Maison Verdun's head chef was a rising star named Olivia Harcourt, ambitious, sharp, and recently rumored to be feuding with other chefs over some secretive competition being planned in the city. When I dropped Wolfe's name, she tensed, then smiled too quickly. "A misunderstanding, surely," she said. But her eyes didn't agree. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting in the office, hands steepled, eyes closed. He didn't open them when I reported. "Archie," he said, "the poisoned plate was not intended to kill me. It was bait. Someone wishes to drag me into their petty contest of egos. I will not oblige." "Funny," I said, "because you're already obliging. You're talking about it. You're thinking about it. And you had Saul chasing down leads before breakfast." He opened his eyes then, black and sharp as obsidian. "Yes, because they have trespassed. That was all. But it was enough. The brownstone had been disturbed, and Wolfe would not rest until order was restored. Someone out there thought they could toy with Nero Wolfe, using a poisoned plate. They were about to learn how very wrong they were. The brownstone always had its rules, and one of them was this: you didn't barge in without an invitation. Clients came, suspects came, even Kramer came when he was in the mood to argue, but they came through channels. That's why the knock on the door at 10 the next morning felt like the universe was laughing at Wolfe's sense of order. I went to answer, half expecting another silver tray or maybe a box of poisoned petit fours, but instead I found Olivia Harcourt herself on the stoop, tall in her chef's whites, eyes sharp as a paring knife. She brushed past me before I could even quip. "I must speak with Mr. Wolfe," she announced, her voice carrying the certainty of someone used to commanding kitchens. Fritz, hovering in the hall, looked scandalized at the intrusion. Wolfe, in his office, set down his morning beer and turned those dark eyes on her with all the warmth of a winter draught. "You presume much," he said. "I presume necessity," she replied, seating herself without waiting for permission. "You received a dish last night, delivered falsely under my restaurant's name. I had nothing to do with it." "That remains to be seen," Wolfe said evenly. She leaned forward, clasping her hands tightly. "I'm telling you the truth. Someone is trying to ruin me, tend to use you in the process." That last line had Wolfe's eyebrows twitching just enough to tell me she had hit the right note. He loathes being used. I leaned against the globe, watching, because my gut said she hadn't come here out of courtesy. She was desperate. Wolfe drummed his fingers once. "Explain. There is a private contest," she said. "A gathering of chefs, critics, investors. Not public, not yet, but it will determine reputations, fortunes. I was invited. So were others. And I refused." "Why?" Wolfe asked. "Because it is not a competition. It is a spectacle, arranged by men who care nothing for food, only for the drama of watching us claw each other. I cook to create, not to entertain their greed. So I declined. And," Wolfe prompted, "and since then I have been targeted. Whispers that my recipes are stolen, rumors that I cut corners, that my staff is incompetent. And now this, sending you poisoned food under my name. It is sabotage, designed to destroy me." She sat back, breathing hard, and for a moment the sharpness in her eyes dimmed into fear. Wolfe regarded her without pity. "You wish me to clear your name. I wish you to uncover the truth," she said, "because if this continues, I am finished." Silence filled the room. Wolfe hated being pulled into the world's squabbles, but he hated trespass more. And this, in his view, was a double trespass. Someone had fouled his table and used his name as a stage. "Archie," he said finally, "summon Mr. Panzer. He will continue his observations. Miss Harcourt, you will provide me with the list of your fellow invitees to this contest." She hesitated, then nodded, scribbling names on a notepad I handed her. When she was done, she rose, thanked Wolfe stiffly, and left without a backward glance. The list contained 4 names. Anton Murillo, a flamboyant Italian chef known for theatrics more than sauces. Celeste March, a critic with a reputation for savage takedowns. Lionel Green, an investor with fingers in half the city's eateries. And, of course, Raymond Vukovic, our old friend from Le Gant Rouge, whose ego could barely fit through a doorway. I whistled low. That's a lively bunch. If anyone wanted to see chefs gutted, it'd be that crowd. And Vukovich, he's like a bad penny. Pfui, Wolfe muttered. They are gnats. But gnats may spread disease. By afternoon, Saul reported in. He had followed Vukovich the previous evening to a private dining club, where Vukovich met with Green and March. No notes passed, no raised voices, but plenty of smiles that smelled of collusion. Saul, being Saul, also picked up a scrap of overheard conversation. Let her squirm, she'll break soon. I carried that back to Wolfe, who listened without blinking. So, they strike in concert. Miss Harcourt was correct. She is the target. And I the weapon. You don't like being anyone's knife, I said. No, he growled. But if they press it into my hand, I will cut where I please. The next visitor arrived just before dinner. Celeste March, critic extraordinaire, swept in wearing enough perfume to fumigate the office. She smiled at me like I was a waiter beneath her notice, then turned her charm-full beam on Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe, she purred, I thought it only fair to offer my perspective. You've been dragged into petty squabbles. I assure you nothing serious is afoot. Only rivalries, childish pranks. First ignored. Wolfe regarded her with the disdain he usually reserved for unripe tomatoes. You lie, he said simply. Her smile flickered, but she recovered. Come now. Surely you won't let yourself be baited. You're above such games. You attempt flattery, Wolfe said. It is wasted. If you fear exposure, say so plainly. If you seek to mislead me, leave, March stiffened. I came to spare you the indignity of chasing phantoms. But if you insist on wallowing in drama, then so be it. She rose, flounced out, and left a trail of perfume that made me sneeze. Wolfe closed his eyes. So she seeks to contain me. That confirms her guilt, or her nerves, I said. She's a critic. Nerves come with the territory. No, Wolfe murmured. Her appetite betrays her. She craves control, and control slipping from her hands makes her reckless. By then dinner was served, and Wolfe ate with his usual discipline, but I could tell his mind was far from the lamb stew. He was already arranging the suspects like chess pieces. Harcourt the victim, Vukovich the brute, Green the financier, March the manipulator, Murillo the showman. The poisoned plate had opened a stage, and now Wolfe would not rest until the curtain fell. That night, as I wrote up my notes, the phone rang. A male voice, low and tight, whispered through the line, Tell Wolfe, another plate will come. Chance this time someone will eat it. Then the line went dead. I set the receiver down, my skin prickling. Wolfe didn't need me to repeat it. He had been watching, eyes open, as though he'd heard every word through the walls. The brownstone, he said quietly, is no longer merely disturbed. It has been challenged, and challenges must be answered. When a voice on the telephone promises poisoned food, you don't sleep well. I didn't anyway. Wolfe, on the other hand, treated it like another fact to be catalogued, no more disruptive than a line in his plant log. He retired to the orchids after his third beer and left me downstairs staring at the silent phone like it might ring again with a death sentence. By morning, I was jumpy enough to drink Fritz's chicory blend without complaint. The brownstone had that brittle stillness it gets when Wolfe is thinking harder than he wants to admit. He spent the morning paging through reference books that had nothing to do with food or crime. Voltaire, Marcus Aurelius, A History of Medieval Trade Routes, like a man layering seasoning before deciding which spice to use. I knew better than to ask questions. At 11, Saul Panzer called. Archie, you'll want this. Green met with Vukovich again last night. They weren't alone. Anton Murillo was there. The three of them talked for an hour in a private room. Couldn't catch much, but I heard Green say, the next course must be final. Then they laughed. Final as in curtain call or final as in funeral? I asked. Didn't sound theatrical, Saul said. I thanked him, wrote it down and relayed it to Wolfe. He grunted, which in his language meant he was pleased, and went back to his book. I was about to poke him for more when the bell rang. This time it was Murillo himself. The Italian chef strutted into the office, with a flair that would have been more at home on a stage than a kitchen. He wore a scarlet scarf over his jacket, and his hands never stopped moving as he spoke. Signor Wolfe, he declared, I come to you not as suspect, but as admirer. You have reputation, yes? The great detective, the immovable mind. I wish to reassure you that what happened, this poisoned dish, is nothing. A mistake. An error of identity. You are dragged into drama that belongs only to us. Wolfe didn't even glance up from his book. And yet here you are. Murillo laughed nervously. Of course, because I respect you. But do not trouble yourself. Chefs fight, critics gossip, investors scheme. It is our world. You should stay out of it. Pfui, Wolfe muttered. He closed the book and fixed Murillo with a stare sharp enough to slice pancetta. You seek to dismiss me. Why? Murillo spread his hands. Because you are too large a figure. You give importance to a game that deserves none. You lie, Wolfe said. That knocked the smile off Murillo's face. He stammered, tried to recover, then stood abruptly. Believe what you like. I have kitchens to run. He stormed out, scarf trailing behind him like a banner in retreat. When the door closed, Wolfe leaned back. Archie, what did you observe? That he sweats when pressed and he lies badly. Also, his scarf is ridiculous. Ridicule is irrelevant, Wolfe said. But his fear is not. He knows more than he dares admit. He plays at theatre, but his lines are borrowed. He parrots Green and Vukovic, so he's their errand boy, perhaps. Or their mask, Wolfe shut his eyes. Regardless, the pattern is clear. They conspire, and the conspiracy has chosen food as weapon, metaphor, and stage. That was Wolfe's way of saying the thing was heating up. By mid-afternoon, the second delivery arrived. Same silver tray, same folded slip. Fritz nearly slammed the door in the delivery man's face, but I intercepted. The slip this time bore Murillo's name. Inside the tray was a perfectly plated risotto, saffron yellow and fragrant. Too fragrant. I carried it into the office. Wolfe sniffed once, grimaced, and pushed it away. Coumarin again, stronger. So the caller wasn't bluffing, I said. Another plate. And this time definitely poisoned. Yes, Wolfe said. The escalation is deliberate. First theatre, now warning. The next will be fatal if unchecked. Fatal for who? Whoever tastes it, he said. That sent a chill crawling down my spine. We sealed the risotto and stashed it with the duck in the cold box. Wolfe dictated a note to Saw. Intensify surveillance. Track movements of Green, Vukovic, Murillo, and March. Report all gatherings, all deliveries. Evening brought no rest. At 8, Lionel Green himself arrived, his suit immaculate, his manners smooth as butter. He smiled as if the brownstone were his own drawing room. Mr. Wolfe, he said, I hear you've been disturbed by some childish pranks. Allow me to assure you, no harm is intended. Rivalries get heated, yes, but such things pass. Best you step back before you find yourself entangled in smoke and mirrors, Wolfe snorted. Your phrasing is telling. Smoke and mirrors. Which is this, illusion or fire? Green's smile faltered, but only slightly. Business thrives on competition. Sometimes egos bruise. But we are not criminals. You are worse, Wolfe said. Criminals act for gain. You act for vanity. You stage poisons as performances, threats as amusements. Pfui, you disgust me. For once Green lost his polish. His face darkened and he leaned forward. Be careful, Wolfe. You meddle in affairs beyond your kitchen. This is not a kitchen, Wolfe said coldly. This is my house, and you have fouled it. I will not forgive. Green stood abruptly, muttered something under his breath and left. When the door closed, I let out a low whistle. You sure you want to rile him like that? He's got money, reach, and apparently poisoned risotto to spare. Let him rage, Wolfe said. The more noise he makes, the clearer his guilt. That night, as Fritz cleared away dinner, I sat with Wolfe in the office. The 2 poisoned plates chilled in the cold box like exhibits waiting for trial. The suspects had all made their appearances. Harcourt pleading innocence, March spinning lies, Murillo panicking, Green posturing, Vukovic grinning unseen in the shadows. And through it all, Wolfe sat immovable, building the pattern in his mind. He spoke finally, his voice low. Archie, appetite is a fine servant and a vile master. These people have surrendered to it, and in their hunger, they seek to make me their theatre. I will not allow it. I jotted that down because it had the ring of one of his aphorisms. The phone rang again, close to midnight. This time no whisper, just a single sentence, spoken clearly, calmly. Tomorrow night one of them dies at the table. The line clicked dead. I turned to Wolfe. He hadn't moved, but his eyes were open, dark and steady. So, he said, the performance accelerates very well. We shall set the stage ourselves. And just like that, the brownstone was no longer merely disturbed. It was preparing for war. The phone call promising death at a table didn't leave the brownstone so much as it lingered in the corners, like smoke after a fire. Fritz clanged pans a little louder in the kitchen, and even the orchid seemed restless when Wolfe went up for his morning ritual. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, waiting for the phone to ring again, but it didn't. When the sun finally burned its way through the curtains, I felt like I'd been trampled by the entire herd of Green's investors. Wolfe, of course, was unruffled. He came down from the orchids at 9, settled into his chair and opened the morning paper, as though no one had promised a corpse over the telephone. He read in silence, sipping his beer, and let the suspense ripen like an overripe melon. Finally, he set the paper aside and spoke. "Archie, fetch Mr. Panzer, and prepare to summon the others. They will gather here this evening." I blinked. "All of them? You mean Harcourt, Green, March, Murillo, and Vukovic?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "Tonight. You're staging your own banquet," I said. "And you think they'll come willingly, knowing someone already promised poison?" "They will come," Wolfe replied, "because they fear more what happens if they do not. Fear is the source I require." I called Saul, who didn't bother with questions. He knew by Wolfe's tone what was happening. Then I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with the suspects. Harcourt hesitated but agreed quickly, almost gratefully. March tried to purr her way out of it, but Wolfe's summons was an iron hook. Murillo fussed, swore he was too busy, then caved in with theatrical resignation. Green agreed smoothly, though I could hear the ice under his polish. And Vukovic, well, he laughed like it was an invitation to his coronation. By the time Fritz laid out lunch, Wolfe was already arranging the order of battle in his mind. He ate sparingly, which meant he left food on the plate. That alone told me the stakes were rising. The rest of the afternoon crawled. I polished the office, straightened the chairs, checked the locks, and tried to ignore the cold weight of the sealed trays in the refrigerator, the duck and the risotto, silent witnesses waiting for their cue. Wolfe sat immovable, his eyes closed, but I could tell by the twitch in his fingers that his mind was gnawing through the puzzle like a grinder on bone. At 8 sharp, the bell rang. They came in one by one, tension clinging to them like sweat. Harcourt first, pale but defiant. Murillo next, scarf even more ridiculous, eyes darting. Green smooth as glass, nodding to me like an equal he didn't respect. March sweeping in with her perfume, her smile sharpened into something brittle. And finally Vukovic, swaggering like the room already belonged to him. I ushered them into the office where Wolfe sat waiting, massive and still. The air felt thick, heavy with the knowledge that one of them might be marked for death before the night ended. "Ladies, gentlemen," Wolfe said, his voice low but carrying, "you are here because you have fouled my house. You have sent poison to my table. You have lied, conspired, and sought to make theatre of appetite. I do not permit this. Tonight the performance ends." They shifted in their chairs, exchanging glances, but Wolfe gave them no time. He gestured to the trays on the side table. I carried them forward and lifted the lids. The duck, the risotto, still intact, their smells faint but unmistakable. "These," Wolfe said, "are your works. Not to kill me, but to unsettle, to taunt, to provoke. A child's trick, but with lethal seasoning. And now a third has been promised. Tomorrow night one of them dies at the table." That was the threat. But I say to you, the threat is here now, and the question is, who sharpened it? March scoffed lightly. "This is melodrama, Mr. Wolfe. Poisoned food is theatre. Surely you don't think one of us would stoop?" "Silence," Wolfe snapped, sharper than I'd heard in months. She froze, lips parted. "I think nothing, I deduce. And deduction says this: the conspiracy is layered. Green funds it. Murillo parrots it. March masks it. Vukovic basks in it. Harcourt resists it, and someone among you escalates it." Green leaned forward, his smile tight. "You throw accusations like confetti. Where is your proof?" Wolfe's eyes glittered. "Proof, Mr. Green, is inescapable when vanity leaves fingerprints. The duck bore fennel, Harcourt's signature ingredient stolen from her menus. The risotto bore saffron, Murillo's hallmark. But both were laced with poison. Neither Harcourt nor Murillo is fool enough to sabotage themselves. So whose hand placed the poison? The financiers? Too crude. The critics? Too eager. The restaurateurs? Too proud. Each suspects the other, which is precisely the design." He leaned back, folding his hands. "You are pawns, but pawns reveal their master when they move too boldly. Last night, Green, you said the next course must be final. To whom? And why?" Green stiffened. Murillo blurted, "Because it was his idea. He said it, not me." March hissed, You fool, don't, but Wolf's hand rose, silencing them. He turned his gaze to Vukovich, who alone remained calm, even amused. And you, Mr. Vukovich, Wolf said. You have been silent. Why? Vukovich spread his hands, smiling. Because I enjoy the show, and because you already know. I don't need to explain myself. That was when the phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Everyone jumped but Wolf, who simply nodded to me. I picked it up. A voice, low and certain, said, "It happens tonight." Then the line went dead. When I turned, Wolf was watching the suspects with eyes like black glass. None of them spoke, but the air was charged, each of them wondering if the next plate would carry their name. "Very well," Wolf said softly. "So the third course is served. Then tonight we shall dine on truth." And with that, the stage was set. The poisoned plate was no longer a symbol. It was a promise. And Wolf intended to break it before anyone could swallow a bite. When Wolf dismissed the gathering after the midnight call, nobody left with dignity. Green muttered curses under his breath. Murillo tugged at his scarf as if it were strangling him. March tried to mask her shaken nerves with perfume and hauteur. And Vukovich, the only one still smirking, lingered long enough to wink at me as though we were co-conspirators in his private drama. Harcourt left last, pale but resolute, whispering that she trusted Wolf to save her. That made her the bravest of the bunch, though bravery and desperation often wear the same face. Once the door shut and the locks were turned, the brownstone exhaled. Wolf sat unmoving, eyes closed, the lines of his face carved deeper by the weight of calculation. I didn't interrupt. When he's in that state, words bounce off him like peas off a battleship. Instead, I poured myself a stiff drink, checked the trays in the refrigerator, duck and risotto still sealed tight, and tried to ignore the ringing in my ears from that telephone promise. "It happens tonight." Wolf opened his eyes at 2 a.m. "Archie." "Still here," I said. "You will call Mr. Panzer at 9. He will position himself near Green's offices. And send Fred and Ori to observe Vukovich and March. I want eyes on each all day. No gaps." "Got it," I said, jotting it down. "And me?" "You," Wolf said. "Will call Miss Harcourt. Invite her here for luncheon. She must remain under my eye." So that was the plan. Guard the lamb, watch the wolves, and wait for the knife to show itself. At noon, Harcourt arrived. She looked like she hadn't slept, but Fritz's cooking restored some color to her cheeks. Wolf didn't bother with pleasantries. "Miss Harcourt, you are the fulcrum. They conspire to topple you, but you also hold the key to their exposure. Tell me, who benefits most if you are ruined?" She hesitated, then said, "Vukovich. He has wanted my position for years. He covets the critics' praise. He would do anything to take it." "Anything?" Wolf pressed. She nodded. "He would lie, steal, poison if it made him king." Wolf's lips tightened. "Perhaps. But kings do not stoop to fetch trays. He basks in drama but lets others soil their hands. That is his weakness." She sagged a little, then asked, "Then who sent the plates?" "Not yet," Wolf said. "But soon." The afternoon dragged. Saul called at 3. Green had met with no one, but he made a phone call that lasted 20 minutes, too muffled for Saul to catch. Fred reported Murillo pacing outside his restaurant, shouting at staff, scarf fluttering like a flag of surrender. Ori trailed March to a tea shop where she scribbled notes furiously, her face pale and set. And Vukovich? He dined at leisure, laughing too loudly as though daring us to watch. By 6, the brownstone felt like a fortress waiting for siege. Wolf had me polish the office again, arrange chairs in a circle, and set the 2 poisoned dishes on a side table like exhibits in a trial. Fritz prepared a simple dinner, veal and greens, that Wolf touched with mechanical precision, his mind elsewhere. At 8, the bell rang again. Another delivery boy, another tray. My stomach clenched as I signed for it and carried it into the office. Wolf gestured and I set it down. Inside was a roasted pheasant, golden skin glistening, perched on a bed of wild mushrooms. The smell was intoxicating and wrong. Wolf leaned forward, inhaled once, and his face darkened. Arsenic, crude. They are losing subtlety. That was the third course, promised and delivered. Only this time Wolf's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "Archie, tonight they force my hand. We summon them all now," so I called. And within the hour the brownstone filled again, the suspects marching back into the office with the reluctance of prisoners summoned to judgment. Wolfe didn't waste time. He gestured at the 3 trays uncovered on the side table. Duck, risotto, pheasant. Poisoned trophies in a grotesque parade. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe said, his voice cold, "your theater is complete. 3 courses, 3 poisons, 3 insults to my house. You sought to make me stage for your appetites. I rejected. Tonight I conclude it." March tried to laugh, brittle and sharp. "You can't prove—" "Silence!" Wolfe thundered, louder than I'd heard him in years. She froze. Green funds it. Murillo parrots it. March masks it. Vukovich struts upon it. Harcourt resists it. That was the pattern. But the escalation, 3 poisoned plates, betrays the hand. Vanity leaves traces. Money pays bills. But only one of you is desperate enough to risk crude arsenic after subtlety failed. His eyes fixed on Murillo. "You," Wolfe said. "You played the fool. But fools reveal themselves. The risotto bore your saffron, the pheasant your mushrooms, ingredients too familiar to be coincidence. You sought to frame others with your signatures, but you overplayed. You were the courier, yes, but you also became the poisoner. Because Green and March and Vukovich could not dirty their hands, and Harcourt, your rival, was meant to fall. So you carried the trays, you delivered the threats, and in doing so you revealed yourself." Murillo's face went white, then scarlet. He stammered, denied, cursed, but the others turned on him. Green sneered, March hissed, Vukovich laughed, and Harcourt stared in shock. Wolfe closed his eyes. "You conspired, yes. But you, Murillo, poisoned the plate. For vanity. For ambition. For nothing. I unlocked the door and they filed out. Murillo protesting, the others muttering, the tension crackling like lightning ready to strike again. Wolfe remained still, his eyes closed, his words final. "Archie," he murmured, "appetite has many courses. Tonight we saw its last, but I wasn't so sure. Because when the door shut, I caught a look between Green and March, quick, sharp, like knives flashing in the dark. The brownstone was safe for the moment, but the feast wasn't over. Not yet. The brownstone didn't sleep easy that night. Fritz cleaned the kitchen until the counters gleamed like mirrors, then retreated upstairs, muttering prayers in Swiss German I'd never heard before. Wolfe stayed in his chair long after midnight, his eyes closed, his hands folded, as immovable as the granite lions out front of the library. I paced because someone had to move, and because the look Green and March had shared as they left kept needling at me. Wolfe had nailed Murillo to the wall, but the strings still hung in the air, tangled and dangerous. By morning I had 3 calls waiting. Saul's report came first. He'd trailed Green to a private banker's office where, according to Saul, a significant withdrawal was made. Cash, in an envelope, passed to an associate whose face Saul couldn't place. "Not charity," Saul said. "Looked like hush money." Fred called next. He'd kept eyes on Vukovich, who dined with a group of critics late into the night. "He's spreading stories," Fred said. "Says Harcourt's finished. Poisoned dishes tied to her, the police sniffing around. He's painting her as the villain." Then Ori, who'd followed March. She had slipped into a publisher's office with a folder tucked under her arm. "She's preparing a column," Ori reported. Headlined something like "Death by Dinner. The Fall of Olivia Harcourt." Didn't stay long, but she looked pleased with herself. I relayed it all to Wolfe while he ploughed through his eggs and beer. He didn't interrupt, just nodded once when I finished. "Archie," he said, "fetch Miss Harcourt. She must hear this." When she arrived an hour later, she looked worn down to the bone. Wolfe wasted no time. "Miss Harcourt, they sharpen their knives still. Green pays silence, Vukovich spreads lies, March prepares ruin. And Murillo, though exposed, will not bear this alone. He will drag you with him if unchecked." Her hands trembled. "Then I am finished. They have already succeeded." "No," Wolfe said firmly, "because they presumed I would tolerate trespass. I will not." He closed his eyes, then added, "You must withstand one more evening. Tonight all return here. The matter concludes." I groaned. "Another circus." "Wolfe, we're going to need a ticket booth." "Pfui," he muttered. "It is necessary." So I made the calls. Green tried to demur, but Wolfe's summons is not easily ignored. March laughed too brightly, then agreed. Vukovich accepted with relish. And Murillo, cornered and furious, ranted but ultimately promised to appear. By dusk I'd arranged the chairs again, checked the locks and set the poison trays in sight. Wolfe had Fritz prepare nothing fancy, just stew and bread to remind us that food could still be honest. At 8 the bell rang, and the suspects filed in once more. This time the air was thicker, heavier, as though the walls themselves were braced for impact. Wolfe didn't open with speeches. He let silence press down until they shifted in their seats, restless, uneasy. Then he spoke. "You return again because the play is unfinished. You imagine you hold the pen. You do not, I do, and tonight the ending is written." March smirked. "You're fond of drama, Mr. Wolfe. Perhaps you should have been a playwright." "Enough," Wolfe said, voice sharp as a cleaver. "You sow words like weeds, madam. They choke truth, but truth blooms still." He gestured to the trays. 3 poisons, 3 signatures. Duck, Harcourt's fennel. Risotto, Murillo's saffron. Pheasant, Murillo's mushrooms, each designed to implicate each a trap. Yet only one hand added the poison. And that hand grows careless. Murillo shifted, sweat gleaming on his brow. "You accuse me again." "Yes," Wolfe said, "because your fear betrays you. But not alone. Green's money paid for silence. March's pen prepared ruin. Vukovic's vanity fanned flames. Each of you played a role. But the hand that poured arsenic was yours, Murillo." Murillo sputtered, tried to rise, but Green's voice cut across. "He's a fool, Wolfe. But fools don't act without guidance." Someone whispered in his ear. Someone told him how to stage this farce. Wolfe's eyes opened, dark and steady. "Correct. And that someone is you, Mr. Green. You mask ambition as investment, but you orchestrated from the shadows. You dangled money before Murillo, promises before March, praise before Vukovic. You fed their appetites. They devoured. You directed." Green's polish cracked, but only for a moment. "Ridiculous," he said smoothly. "You can't prove—" "I can," Wolfe interrupted. "Because vanity leaves signatures. The envelopes Saul observed, your withdrawals, match the timing of the trays. And the mushrooms used in the pheasant dish were purchased through your supplier. The receipts bear your name. Proof enough." The silence that followed was volcanic. March's smile withered. Vukovic's smirk faltered. Murillo buried his face in his scarf. Harcourt sat frozen, wide-eyed. Finally, March found her voice. "So Green funds, Murillo poisons, and what of me? You think I merely scribble? You amplify," Wolfe said coldly. "You prepare the narrative, the scandal, the ruin. Without your pen, their scheme has no sting. You are not innocent. You are complicit," Vukovic chuckled darkly. "And me? You?" Wolfe sneered. "You are nothing but theatre." You grinned while others dirtied their hands, hoping to inherit the ashes. "You disgust me." The room seethed with silence, each suspect caught in Wolfe's net. Finally, he closed his eyes. "The brownstone is cleansed. The trespass ended. You may leave, but know this. Your appetites have destroyed you. The city will whisper. Your reputations will rot. That is justice." I unlocked the door and they filed out, broken, muttering, their schemes shattered. Only Harcourt lingered. Whispering thanks, Wolfe brushed aside. When the door shut, the house exhaled again. Wolfe leaned back, drained, and finally spoke. "Archie, man feasts on appetite until appetite feasts on man. Tonight we witnessed the banquet." I jotted it down because it was the kind of line only Wolfe could deliver. Then I poured him another beer and myself a drink. Because the brownstone had survived the poisoned plate, but the taste of it would linger for a long time. When the suspects had gone, and Fritz finally dared to unbolt the door to let the night air wash out the stink of ego and fear, the brownstone fell into a silence that wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that buzzes like static in your ears, full of things unsaid and unsettled. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his eyes closed, hands folded as though the matter were finished. But I knew better. He only looked to sleep when his mind was digging deepest. I sat across from him, notebook in my lap, trying to make sense of the evening. He'd called them all out. Green's money, March's pen, Murillo's poison, Vukovic's vanity. But it didn't feel tied off. The pieces fit, but the knot wasn't pulled tight. Harcourt had left with tears of relief in her eyes, but relief wasn't the same as safety. Not when 3 poisoned plates still sat sealed in our refrigerator like evidence that refused to stay quiet. "Wolfe," I said finally, "you think they're finished? Just going to walk away and accept their reputations are cooked?" "Pfui," he muttered, not opening his eyes. "They are not finished. They are ravenous. But they are also exposed. The appetite that once emboldened them now betrays them. They will devour one another before they touch me again." That was tidy philosophy, but it didn't ease the knot in my gut. I'd seen Green's face harden, March's smile shrivel, Murillo's rage boil, and Vukovic's smirk stiffen. Those weren't people bowing out. Those were people sharpening their knives. The phone rang just past midnight. I nearly leapt out of my skin. Wolfe gestured lazily, and I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, low, deliberate. The banquet is not over. Tomorrow a real plate will be served. And someone will not rise from the table. Then the line went dead. I relayed it, and Wolfe finally opened his eyes. They were dark, sharp, glinting. So, he said, they dare continue. Very well. Then we too shall continue. He said no more, but the brownstone didn't rest. Fritz stayed awake, muttering about locks and curses. I sat in the office until dawn, watching Wolfe's eyes close again, though I knew he was seeing every move of the game in his head. By morning, Saul called with fresh news. Archie, Green met with March at dawn, private breakfast. They argued, loud. He accused her of betrayal. She accused him of cowardice. They left separately, furious. Good, I said. Maybe they'll poison each other and save us the trouble. Saul's chuckle was dry. Don't count on it. They're too proud. I brought the report to Wolfe over breakfast. He listened, then nodded once. The alliance crumbles, predictable. Then the bell rang. It was Harcourt again, clutching a folded note in shaking hands. This was slipped under my door this morning, she said. I thought you should see. I opened it. The handwriting was jagged, furious. Tonight the course is yours. You will swallow what you deserve. She was pale as porcelain. They mean to kill me. They won't stop. Wolfe motioned her to sit. Calm yourself. Fear clouds the palate. They will not kill you. Not while I hold the table. That's easy for you to say, she snapped, though her voice shook. You don't leave this house. I still have to walk the streets, open my doors. You will not, Wolfe said firmly. You will remain here under my roof. Archie will fetch whatever you require. Fritz will feed you. Here you are beyond their reach. Her eyes filled, and she whispered, Thank you. Wolfe closed his eyes again. Do not thank me. Thank their arrogance. They believe threats will topple you. They are wrong. Their desperation hastens their ruin. That was his version of comfort. The afternoon stretched taut. Saul shadowed Green. Fred trailed Vukovic. Ori watched March. Reports trickled in, Green pacing his office like a caged lion. March scribbling furiously in cafes. Vukovic laughing too loudly in public, as though trying to hide cracks in his grin. Murillo, oddly, vanished from sight. Not at his restaurant, not at his home. That last detail made Wolfe frown. Absence is louder than noise, he murmured. The fool hides. That makes him dangerous. At 7, Fritz served a simple supper for us and Harcourt. She ate little, her nerves frayed. Wolfe took his meal with his usual deliberation, but his silence was heavy. When the plates were cleared, he summoned me with a flick of his hand. Archie, summon them again. All of them tonight, I stared. Again? Wolfe, they'll think you're running a subscription service. Phooey, he said. They will come, they must. The trespass ends tonight, so I called. Green snapped but agreed. March purred, then hissed but agreed. Vukovic laughed and said he wouldn't miss the show. Murillo didn't answer, but half an hour later he appeared at the brownstone door, scarf gone, eyes wild. He pushed inside, ignoring my protests, and stormed into the office. You, he shouted at Wolfe, you ruin me. You expose me, but you don't know everything. Sit, Wolfe commanded, calm as stone. Murillo trembled, but he sat. His hands shook as he spoke. It wasn't only me. I delivered plates, yes, but they demanded it. Green paid, March wrote. Vukovic gloated. I was nothing but their tool. Yet you poisoned, Wolfe said. Murillo's face crumpled. Yes, but not alone. The recipe, the idea, came from her. His trembling finger shot across the room, not at March, not at Harcourt, but at the door where Celeste March had just entered, perfume preceding her. For a moment the room froze. March laughed, brittle. You believe this, fool? But Wolfe's eyes opened, dark and gleaming. I believe desperation, madam. It strips vanity of its mask. And tonight yours begins to crack. The air hummed with tension, each suspect caught between denial and revelation. And I knew then that Wolfe had them exactly where he wanted them, hungry, frantic, and ready to devour one another. The feast of truth was about to be served. The moment Murillo's trembling finger stabbed the air toward March, the room seemed to tilt. Harcourt sucked in a sharp breath. Green stiffened. Vukovic chuckled like he'd been waiting for the show to start. And March herself stood poised, perfume curling in the air like smoke. Her laugh was brittle, a sound meant to shatter nerves but one that only betrayed her own. Wolfe didn't move, didn't blink. He let the silence swell until it pressed on every chest like a weight. "Madam," he said finally, voice low, "your denial is rehearsed. Your laugh too brittle. You strain to dismiss, which reveals you." March's eyes flashed. "Reveals me to what? To the ramblings of this buffoon?" She gestured at Murillo with disdain. "He has been caught, so he claws for company. Shall we believe every coward who points fingers?" Murillo shot upright, scarlet scarf long gone, sweat streaking his brow. "Coward, you gave me the recipe. You whispered which ingredients to use, how to mimic Harcourt, how to lace them so suspicion spread. You said it would ruin her, not kill her. You promised." March's mouth curled in scorn, but a flicker of panic betrayed her before the mask returned. Wolfe's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, glinting. "Ah, so the fissures widen. One crumbles, another cracks. Good, the pattern strengthens." Green leaned forward, smooth as ever, but with ice in his tone. "Enough of this nonsense, Wolfe. You've badgered us with accusations, but where is your proof? Recipes, whispers? You can't condemn on gossip." Wolfe turned his gaze to Green. "You attempt to shift focus, Mr. Green, as always. But money is traceable. You fed funds to fuel this charade." Murillo supplied the hands, March the words. "And you, Green, supplied the purse. Without you, there would be no theatre." Vukovich laughed, broad and mocking. "So what am I, Wolfe? The villain left without a part? You disappoint me. Surely I deserve more." Wolfe's eyes slid to him, expression colder than the winter stone of the brownstone's walls. "You are precisely what you are, Mr. Vukovich, a parasite. You basked, smirked, gloated, spreading tales to amplify the poison. You added no substance, only rot, and you hope to inherit ruins. Your role is the most contemptible." Vukovich's smirk twitched, but he masked it with another laugh. "I watched the pieces grind against each other, every suspect shifting in their chair, the air thick with distrust. Harcourt sat rigid, hands knotted, eyes darting from one face to the next, like she was watching knives drawn in a dark alley. Then Wolfe leaned forward, and his voice dropped into that tone that could still a room. "Tonight we end this." He gestured toward me. I uncovered the trays on the side table. Duck, risotto, pheasant. Poisoned exhibits glowing under the light. And next to them, Wolfe had ordered Fritz to place a fresh, untouched plate. A simple roast chicken, golden and fragrant, its aroma clean of corruption. 3 courses, poisoned, Wolfe said. And now a 4th, pure. "This is the contrast. This is the truth," the suspect stared. March's nostrils flared. Green's eyes narrowed. Vukovich tilted his head as though savoring the drama, and Murillo trembled. Wolfe continued. The poisoned dishes bore signatures not only of ingredients, but of style. Harcourt's fennel, Murillo's saffron, Murillo's mushrooms. Too obvious, too clumsy. The hand that conceived it sought to implicate, not to kill at first. But when subtlety failed, crudeness followed. Arsenic, that betrays panic. Panic belongs to the pen that feared losing its narrative. "Madam March, that is you." March stood, shaking with fury. "Lies! You have no proof." "Pfui!" Wolfe said, cutting her off with a snap. "I have proof enough. Saul traced receipts for mushrooms purchased under Green's name, but delivered to your address. Ori saw you deliver a folder to your publisher, containing drafts prepared before the 3rd course even arrived. You scripted events before they unfolded. You knew the 3rd plate would bear death, because you ordered it so." Her face drained, the perfume in the room suddenly acrid. Green turned on her, voice low and venomous. "You fool! You were supposed to write the story, not become it." March whirled on him. "You paid! Don't you dare wash your hands now. You all played your part. Murillo carried it, you bankrolled it, Vukovich spread it. I only wrote what was inevitable." Murillo jumped to his feet, pointing wildly. "She twists everything. She told me what to do, step by step. I never wanted to." "Sit," Wolfe commanded, and Murillo sat, quivering like a chastened dog. The office was hot with breath and tension. Wolfe closed his eyes, speaking into the silence. This was not one hand alone. It was a chorus. But every chorus has its conductor. Green paid, Vukovich mocked. Murillo poisoned. But March composed the music. She framed the narrative. She promised ruin as though it were prose. "That is the truest poison." March's voice cracked. "Phew, you can't prove intent." Wolfe's lips curled faintly. "Intent proves itself when it arranges outcomes in advance. Your drafts, your purchases, your whispers, they betray you. You sought a headline, "The Fall of Olivia Harcourt," and in your hunger for words you fed others poison. The room broke then. Green cursed, shoving back his chair. Vukovich laughed too loud, trying to cover his discomfort. Murillo buried his face in his hands. And March. March sagged, her mask shattered, eyes hollow. Wolfe raised his hand, stilling the storm. This farce has ended. Leave my house. Crawl back to your shadows. But know this, your names will not recover. Reputations are as delicate as sauces. Once curdled, they cannot be restored. The city will remember. That is justice enough. I opened the door. One by one they filed out, broken pieces of a poisoned puzzle. Green cold as marble, March hollow, Murillo weeping, Vukovich laughing into the dark. Only Harcourt lingered, whispering her thanks once more. Wolfe inclined his head but said nothing. When the door shut, the brownstone finally sighed, the walls loosening their grip. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed. "Archie," he murmured, "men kill for money, women for love, but critics for words. Tonight we dined on vanity, and it was bitter indeed." I jotted it down. It wasn't just an observation. It was Wolfe's epitaph for the entire affair. And as Fritz cleared away the untouched chicken, I realized the brownstone had survived the poisoned plate, but the taste of it would stain the air for a long, long time. The night after Wolfe dismantled March's defenses and sent the whole pack scurrying into the dark, the brownstone felt heavier than usual. Fritz tried to restore normalcy with a custard that could have won medals, but it sat untouched while Wolfe brooded in silence, his eyes half closed, hands folded. He'd declared the matter finished, reputations destroyed, justice delivered, but my instincts didn't let me buy it so neat. I'd seen Green's polished mask slip into fury, March's composure fracture, Murillo's panic curdle, and Vukovich's grin stiffen like plaster. Those weren't people beaten into retreat. Those were wolves forced out of one den and prowling for another. I couldn't shake the feeling that one of them, maybe all, would come back with teeth bared. I told Wolfe as much, pacing the office while he sat immovable. "Archie," he said finally, "their ruin is certain. Appetite undone by excess always collapses. They will gnaw at each other. I need not soil my hands further." "Maybe," I said, "but the call the other night, a real plate will be served. That wasn't theater. That was promise. If they're chewing each other, fine. But if Harcourt's still on the menu, I'd prefer not to watch her choke to death." Wolfe grunted. "Miss Harcourt is safe under this roof. They cannot touch her here," which sounded comforting, except Harcourt wasn't planning to stay forever. She came down late that night, eyes hollow from lack of sleep, and told me in a whisper she had to return to her restaurant. "If I vanish too long, they'll claim I fled. My staff needs me. My patrons—" I tried to argue, but Wolfe overheard and silenced both of us. "You will not return yet. Your absence speaks louder than their whispers. Silence unsettles them more than defense. You remain here until I dismiss you. That should have settled it." Except the next morning brought Saul's report, and it was the kind of news that sets your nerves jangling. He'd followed Green again, this time not to his office, but to a dingy back room on the east side where Green met with Vukovich. Saul, being Saul, got close enough to catch words. Green hissed, "It isn't finished," and Vukovich laughed and said, "Then we serve dessert." When I relayed it, Wolfe's eyes opened at once. "Dessert," he repeated, his lip curling. "So they persist. For vanity without sense." "Sense or not," I said, "they mean another course. And I'd bet the check comes due for Harcourt." For once, Wolfe didn't argue. He closed his eyes again, his fingers drumming lightly against his chair. "Very well. Then we bait them. Tonight, Archie, we set the table." I knew better than to press for details when he was sharpening his mind. He'd reveal the plan when he was good and ready, and not a minute before. The day crawled. Fritz, loyal as ever, busied himself preparing a menu Wolfe didn't intend to eat. Harcourt sat in the office with me, twisting her hands, asking if Wolfe truly believed it would end. I told her the truth. Wolfe never speaks without believing it, but that doesn't mean the world listens. By late afternoon, Ori phoned. March had been spotted again, slipping into her publisher's office with another sheaf of papers. She looked wild, Ori said. Hair unkempt, eyes darting, like someone who'd lost control of the script. Then Fred called. Murillo was holed up in a shabby apartment on the west side, not his own. Drunk, disheveled, ranting at shadows. "He's finished," Fred said. "But finished men do reckless things." Saul checked in last. Green and Vukovich met again, this time with a caterer. They ordered supplies, fine wine, rare truffles, expensive meats. The order was for tonight. A banquet, Saul said. Small, private. And quick. When I hung up, Wolfe spoke without opening his eyes. So they prepare dessert. They cannot resist the finale. I asked him flat out, "You want me to crash it?" "No," Wolfe said. "They will come here. Greed demands an audience, and I am the only audience that matters." It was 7:30 when the bell rang. Not one suspect, but two, Green and Vukovich, shoulder to shoulder like polished devil and grinning hyena. They breezed into the office as if they owned it. Green set down a bottle of Burgundy with a flourish. Vukovich carried a covered dish, and both wore smiles that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Wolfe," Green said smoothly, "we thought it only right to conclude matters on civilized terms. A toast, a final course, and closure." Wolfe didn't move. "You dare bring food into my house again?" Vukovich lifted the lid with theatrical flair. Inside was a tart, glossy and gleaming under the lights, fragrant with almonds and cherries. "Our peace offering," he said, laughing. "Surely even you won't refuse dessert." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Pfui." He didn't so much as glance at the tart again. "Archie, remove it. Store it with the others. This farce continues, but not for long." Green bristled, his polish slipping. "You insult us. We came in good faith. You came with poison." Wolfe cut him off. "Try again, childish repetition, predictable. You imagine persistence equals victory. It equals only exposure." Vukovich chuckled, though less easily. "So what, Wolfe? You'll scold us until we wither?" "Words don't kill." "No," Wolfe said, "but appetites do." The room thickened with silence. Green's hand twitched, as if itching for control he no longer had. Vukovich shifted, the grin painted on but uneasy. Wolfe leaned forward, his voice heavy as iron. "This ends tonight. Enough courses. Enough theatre. I will not permit further trespass. Tomorrow the authorities will have your names, your accounts, your receipts, and the city will know you for what you are. Poisoners of food, of truth, of honor. Leave my house." For a heartbeat I thought Green might defy him. Then he caught Wolfe's stare, and something in it stripped him bare. He gathered his bottle, muttered a curse, and stormed out. Vukovich lingered a moment, his laugh hollow now, then followed. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled, long and heavy. "Archie," he said, "man may stage feasts, but appetite writes its own ending. And theirs is nearly written. I stored the tart with the duck, the risotto, the pheasant, 4 poisoned exhibits in our refrigerator, a grotesque museum of vanity." And as the brownstone settled back into silence, I knew the next gathering would not be far. The final course was coming. The refrigerator now held 4 trays like grim exhibits: duck, risotto, pheasant, tart. Each one a different note in a poisonous symphony, each one daring Wolfe to take the bait. Fritz, appalled to see them stored beside his carefully prepared cheeses, muttered about desecration until Wolfe silenced him with a glare. For my part, I couldn't open the icebox without feeling like I was staring into a mausoleum. Wolfe, of course, regarded them as simple evidence, nothing more, nothing less. The next morning he was already dictating letters by the time I came down, sharp and deliberate. He wanted reports transcribed, statements recorded, and a full account prepared for Inspector Kramer. I raised an eyebrow. "So we're taking this public?" "No," Wolfe said. "We are preparing for the inevitable. Kramer will arrive, with or without invitation. Better to feed him truth than let him choke on rumor. Kramer's not exactly a fan of your truth," I reminded him. "He likes his facts dressed up with fingerprints and alibis." "Pfui," Wolfe muttered. "He will take what I give him." Before I could reply, the phone rang. It was Saul. "Archie, Green's been moving fast. Bank accounts shuffled, documents shredded. He's covering tracks and quick." That got Wolfe's eyes open. "So," he said, "he knows the feast is ending. Good." Desperation sharpens mistakes. Not an hour later, Ori called. March had been seen again at her publisher's office, this time without drafts, just rage. She shouted, demanded immediate publication, threatened reputations. "She's frantic," Ori said. "Like a woman watching her stage collapse." Fred's report was shorter but no cheerier. Murillo had disappeared again, this time leaving behind a note scrawled in wine stains, half legible. One line stuck: "She promised me glory. She gave me ruin." When I read it aloud, Harcourt paled. "They won't stop until one of them burns," she whispered. Wolfe's voice rumbled. No, Miss Harcourt. They will not stop until I end them. That evening the doorbell rang once more. I opened it expecting Green or March, but it was Inspector Kramer, hat low, cigar chewed nearly in half. He barged in like a storm cloud and didn't bother with pleasantries. "All right, Goodwin," he barked. "What's this I hear about poison plates and half the city's culinary elite running scared? You two up to your necks in some damn performance again?" I ushered him into the office, where Wolfe sat immovable. Kramer glared at the trays on the side table. "What the hell is this, Wolfe?" "Evidence," Wolfe said calmly. "Evidence?" Kramer's eyes bulged. "Of what, dinner gone wrong?" "Of conspiracy," Wolfe said. "Of vanity armed with arsenic. 4 plates, each poisoned, each bearing signatures of design meant to implicate and destroy Olivia Harcourt. Behind them stand Green, March, Murillo, and Vukovic." Kramer snorted. "That's a mouthful." "You got proof, or just your usual fancy talk?" Wolfe leaned back. "Taste them if you like." That shut him up for a second. I supplied the details, outlining Saul's reports, Ori's observations, Fred's trails. The receipts traced, the drafts prepared. Kramer listened, chewing his cigar like it was the only thing keeping him from exploding. Finally he growled, "All right. Suppose I believe you. What do you want? Arrests, warrants?" "No," Wolfe said. "Not yet. One more gathering, here, tonight, all present. The matter ends under my roof, not yours." Kramer's face went red. "Damn it, Wolfe. I'm not letting you run another circus while people drop dead. If someone keels over here, it's my badge." "No one will die," Wolfe said evenly. "I forbid it." Kramer cursed, stomped, and finally slammed his hat back on his head. "Now you pull one stunt, Wolfe, and I'll haul you in myself." Then he stormed out, leaving the smell of cigar and fury behind. I looked at Wolfe. "So that went well." "Pfui," he said. "Kramer will circle, but he will not strike until I deliver the feast." And so the stage was set again. By 7, the brownstone was polished, chairs arranged, Fritz fuming in the kitchen about hosting vipers. Harcourt sat pale but steady in the corner, clutching her composure like a shield. Wolfe sat in his chair, eyes closed, waiting for the knock. It came promptly at 8. Green first, immaculate but brittle at the edges. March next, eyes glittering with defiance. Vukovic sauntered in laughing, though the sound rang hollow. And finally Murillo, slouched and trembling, scarf gone, eyes bloodshot. They gathered, glaring, shifting, each carrying the weight of ruin. Wolfe opened his eyes and began. 4 courses, 4 poisons, he said. Each designed to taunt, implicate, destroy. Enough. Tonight the banquet ends, March sneered. "You said that before, Wolfe, yet here we are again." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "Because arrogance resists digestion. But vanity cannot survive exposure." He gestured, and I uncovered the trays. Duck, risotto, pheasant, tart, and beside them Fritz had placed another dish at Wolfe's command. A 5th plate, untouched, plain, unseasoned, a slab of bread and water. "This," Wolfe said, "is what remains when appetite devours itself, nothing." The suspects shifted uneasily. Green's polish cracked, March's hands clenched, Murillo whimpered, Vukovic laughed too loud. Wolfe pressed on, voice iron. "You conspired to ruin Miss Harcourt. You failed. You sought to use me a stage. You failed. You imagined poison would silence, but instead it speaks. And it names you," his eyes fixed on Green. "You funded, on March. You scripted, on Murillo. You poisoned, on Vukovic. You amplified." Then he leaned back, closing his eyes. "Your feast is ended. Your names rot. Leave my house." The silence was thick, broken only by Murillo's sob. Green snarled but said nothing. March stood trembling. Vukovic smirked, though his eyes betrayed him. One by one they filed out, broken, hollow, defeated. When the door shut, the brownstone exhaled. Wolfe leaned back, murmured, "Archie, appetite staged a tragedy. We have witnessed its final act, but I wasn't so sure. Because as the street lamp outside flickered across Green's retreating figure, I saw March's shadow lean close to his, whispering. And that whisper promised the feast wasn't quite finished. Not yet. The quiet after they left was the kind that pressed down instead of lifting. Fritz clattered about the kitchen as if banging pans could chase out the poison still clinging to the air. Harcourt lingered in the office, pale but steadier, asking Wolfe if it was truly finished this time. He didn't answer her. He simply closed his eyes, folded his hands, and let silence be the reply. She took it as reassurance, but I'd been around him long enough to know the truth. Silence meant the wheels were still grinding. I wasn't wrong. When she went upstairs to rest, Wolfe finally spoke. "Archie, we have not seen the last course." "Yeah," I said, pouring myself a drink. "I figured as much. Green and March whispering in the street. You could practically hear them plotting." Wolfe grunted. "Vanity-starved grows vicious. Their alliance phrase, yet they cling. Dangerous. And dangerous how? More poison?" "Perhaps," he said. "Or words sharper than knives. March's pen, Green's money." They wheeled both still. The next morning proved him right. Sol phoned first. "Archie, Green met with a lawyer at dawn. Looks like he's preparing some legal strike. Defamation suits, injunctions may be worse." An hour later, Ori called. March had stormed into her publisher's office again, manuscript in hand. "She's demanding immediate release," Ori said. "Front-page scandal. All names included, especially Harcourt's. She's framing it as Wolfe shielding a guilty woman." That lit a fire under me. I relayed it, and Wolfe's eyes snapped open. "So, they attempt reversal. To accuse Harcourt and by extension me." "Yeah," I said. "Which means they're not done trying to ruin her or you." At noon, the inevitable happened. Kramer stormed through the door without knocking. Hat low, cigar chewed, ragged. He slapped a paper on Wolfe's desk. Headline: "Chef's rivalry ends in poison scandal, Harcourt suspected." March's prose dripped off the page like acid. Kramer glared. "Care to explain, Wolfe? Half the city thinks you're covering for this woman. And me, I've got brass breathing down my neck to haul her in." Harcourt, white-faced, appeared in the doorway clutching the paper. Her voice cracked. "They'll destroy me. Even if I'm innocent, they'll destroy me." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Pfui, they overreach." "In haste they err," Kramer growled. "Err or not, I need more than your disdain. I need names, evidence, something I can hold in court." Wolfe closed his eyes, unmoved by the storm. "Tonight. Return tonight. I will give you what you require." Kramer cursed, paced, and finally slammed his hat back on. "You'd better, Wolfe, or I'll take this brownstone apart myself." He stomped out, leaving the air scorched. The moment the door shut, Harcourt broke down. I can't keep waiting for tonight. They'll drag me out before then." "You will not leave this house," Wolfe said, his voice firm as iron. "You are safe here. Archie, see that she rests." Fear clouds her judgment. She looked at me, eyes wide, desperate. I nodded, though inside I wasn't so sure. The day crawled. Fred reported that Murillo had been spotted wandering drunk, muttering to anyone who'd listen that Green and March had betrayed him. "He's a wreck," Fred said. Might crack wide open. That was something. Wolfe listened, nodded once, and said, "So the chorus fractures further." Evening fell heavy. Fritz lit lamps, set chairs in the office again, and muttered about vipers under his roof. Harcourt sat silent, twisting her hands. Wolfe sat immovable, waiting. At 8 the bell rang. Not one or two, but all four. Green, sharp as a blade. March, perfume thick and brittle. Vukovic laughing too loud. And Murillo, hollow-eyed, scarf gone, hands shaking. They filed into the office like condemned men into a dock. Kramer followed 10 minutes later, cigar clenched, eyes blazing. "All right, Wolfe, show me." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Very well." He gestured to the trays on the side table. 5 now, duck, risotto, pheasant, tart, and the slab of bread. "Symbols of every course, every trespass, gentlemen." "Madam," he said, voice steady, "you imagined poison would silence. Instead it speaks." Green, "Your accounts show payments aligned with each delivery." March, "Your drafts dated scripted outcomes before events occurred." Murillo, "Your hands carried. Your mushrooms betrayed you." Vukovic, "Your mouth spread lies to ensure they stuck. Together, you conspired to ruin Olivia Harcourt. You trespassed in my house. You sought to use me as theatre." "I will not permit it," Green sneered. "Fancy words. Where's your proof?" Kramer barked, "Yeah, Wolfe, enough speeches. Give me something I can haul them in with." Wolfe's eyes glinted. "Proof enough. Receipts in Green's name delivered to March's address. Manuscripts Ori observed. Drafts prepared before poison appeared. Witnesses who overheard boasts, threats, promises. And tonight Murillo's confession." All eyes turned to Murillo. His hands shook, his face blotched. "It's true," he whispered. "They made me." "Green paid," March wrote. Vukovic laughed. "I carried the trays, yes, I poured the poison. But they told me how." "They promised me glory," March shrieked. "Lies!" Green cursed. Vukovic laughed hollowly. Kramer stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "That's enough for me." But Wolfe's voice cut through. "Not yet. One more truth, he pointed at March. You, madam, you are the conductor. Without your pen, this would have been a quarrel, forgotten in days. You sought immortality in words. Instead, you achieve infamy. March crumpled into silence. Green cursed again. Vukovic's laugh died. Murillo wept. Kramer nodded grimly. All right, I've got enough to haul them in. Let's go. One by one, he marched them out, protests echoing down the hall. When the door shut, Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, the brownstone settling into silence once more. Harcourt whispered, You saved me. No, Wolfe murmured. They destroyed themselves. I merely revealed the feast. I jotted it down because it wasn't just a line. It was Wolfe's final verdict. And as Fritz cleared away the untouched bread, I realized the banquet of poison was almost at its end, but not without one last bitter aftertaste still to come. The brownstone exhaled after Kramer hauled them away, but it wasn't the clean kind of exhale that follows a storm. It was more like the uneasy silence after thunder, when you know lightning might strike again. Fritz cleared the office with extra vigor, whisking away glasses no one had touched, muttering that the smell of those people lingered worse than garlic left too long in a pan. Harcourt sat in the corner, hands clasped tight, eyes wide with relief, yet the tremor in her shoulders told me she hadn't really breathed yet. Wolfe, of course, leaned back, eyes closed, already behaving as if the entire city had moved neatly back into place. I wasn't so convinced. March's scream, Green's curses, Vukovic's hollow laughter. Those sounds stuck to me like grease that wouldn't wash off. Murillo's confession might satisfy Kramer, but desperate men with broken pride don't dissolve overnight. And the whispers I'd seen between Green and March told me appetite doesn't stop gnawing just because Wolfe declares the feast is finished. Wolfe, I said finally, you think they'll just sit quiet now? March humiliated, Green exposed. Vukovic laughed out of his own theatre, and Murillo dragged like a dog on a leash. You think they'll let it go? Free, Wolfe muttered without opening his eyes. Their appetites are their punishment. They are ruined. Let them gnaw themselves to bone. That's tidy, I said, but not bulletproof. Green still has money. March still has words. Vukovic still has that grin he thinks hides everything, and Murillo's got desperation with no anchor. You can't tell me one of them won't try a last bite? Then, Wolfe said, finally opening his eyes, they choke on it. That was the end of his sermon. And as usual, he closed his eyes again like the matter was settled. Harcourt gave me a faint smile, as if his words had smoothed her fear, but I didn't take it so easy. The next morning, the newspapers sang a new tune. March's column had been pulled, publisher citing ethical concerns. Instead, the front page carried a headline courtesy of Kramer's press hounds, Poison Conspiracy Broken, Detective Exposes Culinary Sabotage. Harcourt's name was cleared, but Wolfe's wasn't mentioned at all. That's the way Kramer likes it, trimming Wolfe out so it looks like his boys cracked the case. Wolfe read the paper over eggs and beer, lips curling with mild disgust. Justice, he said, is a dish best served without attribution. Sure, I said, but if they're reading this over breakfast, Green and March aren't exactly finished. Kramer's headlines don't erase vanity. They just bruise it. Wolfe ignored me, focusing instead on a passage in Montaigne as though French essays mattered more than lingering danger. But my phone rang an hour later, and Saul's voice proved my point. Archie, he said, they're not licking wounds quietly. Green met with March last night, private. No lawyers, no publishers, just them. I couldn't catch much, but I heard March say one final blow. Green replied, then it must be tonight. I carried that in like a platter, and for once Wolfe didn't brush it off. His brows twitched. So, he murmured, they are not sated. No, I said. They're hungry. And when hunger and pride share a table, it doesn't end with salad. By evening, Fritz had locked every door twice, and I had my revolver closer to hand than usual. Harcourt paced the office, asking if she should flee the city. Wolfe finally told her, no, flight concedes. You remain. Appetite craves audience. Deny it and it grows reckless. Tonight they will expose themselves fully. And at 9 sharp the bell rang. It wasn't all of them. It was only Green and March side by side, sharper than knives. Green carried himself like a man who still believed money could rewrite any ending. March's perfume arrived before her words, and when she smiled it was brittle glass. Mr. Wolfe, Green said smoothly, we come for closure. To put this matter to bed in civilized fashion, March added, one more meal and the curtain falls. I tensed, ready for another tray, but they carried nothing. No tart, no pheasant, no saffron risotto, just themselves and that slick poison in their voices. Wolfe regarded them without rising. "Wait, you imagine the stage still yours? It is not. You are denuded. Nothing remains but your shame." March laughed, but the sound cracked. "Shame, hardly. The world forgets quickly. One sharp story, one decisive gesture, and reputations shift again. We came to offer you a chance to stand aside, Wolfe. Let us write the ending." Green's voice hardened. "Otherwise, the next plate won't be theatre. It will be final." That was when Wolfe's eyes opened, and the weight in them froze the air. "How you dare threaten in my house again? Childish, pathetic." March leaned forward, hissing. "You can't prove everything. You have words, suspicions, but no body, no death. Without that, the world only half believes. But one final act, one real death, will give them the story they crave. And Olivia Harcourt will be finished." Harcourt gasped, and I half rose, but Wolfe raised his hand, still calm. "Enough," he said. "You err in thinking truth requires corpses. Truth devours on its own. Your alliances crumble. Green, your money trail remains. March, your drafts betray intent. Already Kramer builds cases. Tonight you attempt bravado, but it reeks of fear." "You are finished." For once neither answered. They stood rigid, caught in his gaze. Then, like broken puppets, they turned and left without another word. When the door shut, Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and murmured, "Archie, the banquet is ended. They have eaten themselves." Harcourt sat trembling, tears sliding down her cheeks, whispering thanks. Wolfe waved it off as though thanks were meaningless. Later, over beer, he gave me his final verdict. "Man believes appetite sustains him. But when it exceeds bounds, appetite consumes. We have witnessed vanity's feast, and it has devoured its hosts. I jotted it down because I knew the city would forget in a week, but Wolfe's words would last longer than headlines." And as Fritz finally cleared the last poisoned tray from the refrigerator, sealing it away for Kramer's men, I felt the brownstone settle back into its old rhythm. Dinner orchids silence, the sanctity restored, but I also knew this. Every time Fritz set a dish on the table, I'd sniff a little sharper. Once you've stared down 4 poisoned courses and a dessert tart that gleamed like death itself, you don't forget. The feast had ended, but the aftertaste lingered. The conclusion began not with a bang, but with the sort of morning stillness that always made the brownstone feel indestructible. Fritz was in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting faintly through the halls, while Wolfe tended his orchids upstairs. Harcourt had left at dawn, pale but steady, to reclaim her restaurant and her life. Kramer's men had carted off the trays of poisoned dishes, along with March, Green, Murillo, and Vukovic. What remained was silence, the kind of silence Wolfe relished but I never trusted. Silence in this city never meant peace. It meant the air was holding its breath before the next noise. I sat in the office, going over notes. The case had left behind a paper trail as long as Broadway. Saul's reports of Green's secret payments, Ori's observations of March's frantic drafts, Fred's tale on Murillo collapsing in drink, and Vukovic's endless boasting. It was all there, evidence enough to build a dozen cases. But what stuck with me weren't the facts, it was Wolfe's words. Appetite sustains until it consumes. Vanity devours its hosts. It wasn't the kind of thing you find in police files, but it was the only line that explained why 4 people with talent, money, and reputations to lose had thrown themselves headlong into ruin. The doorbell rang, just as I was considering pouring a second cup. I opened it expecting another delivery boy or maybe Kramer, come to gloat. Instead, Olivia Harcourt stood there again, her face calmer though lined with exhaustion. She stepped inside quickly, as if afraid someone might be watching. "I had to thank him once more," she said quietly. I led her to the office, where Wolfe had already descended, settling into his chair with that look of long-suffering patience he reserved for gratitude. She spoke earnestly, telling him her restaurant was already buzzing with reservations. Her name cleared, her staff relieved. "They wanted to ruin me," she said. "But you—" "Free," Wolfe interrupted. "They ruined themselves. I merely revealed the pattern." She smiled faintly. "Then thank you for revealing." That was all, and she left again, lighter than when she had arrived. Watching her go, I felt the first real sense that the case had closed. She was alive, her place intact, her name restored. And Wolfe, though he'd never admit it, had preserved more than her career. He'd preserved the sanctity of his own table. By noon, Kramer barged in, waving papers. "Indictments," he barked. "March Green, Murillo. Vukovic might wriggle a while longer, but I'll get him. Your witnesses better hold up, Wolfe, or I'll—" "You'll what?" Wolfe asked, eyes closed, voice sharp. Kramer chewed his cigar, then grumbled. "Never mind. Damn it, you're impossible." He slammed his hat back on and stomped out, but not before muttering something that sounded almost like thanks. That night, the brownstone returned to rhythm. Fritz served dinner, veal with mustard sauce, delicate and precise. Wolfe ate with his usual discipline, savoring each bite, sipping beer between courses. I sat across, appetite finally unstuck, the weight of poisoned plates no longer clinging to every mouthful. It wasn't until we'd finished, and Fritz cleared the dishes, that Wolfe finally spoke of the case again. He leaned back, eyes closed, hands folded, the great bulk of him at rest. "Archie," he said, "man convinces himself that appetite is art, that greed is ambition, that vanity is vision. They dress their hungers in finery, but beneath it is the same beast. Left unchecked, it devours. Green, March, Murillo, Vukovic, they were not defeated by me. They were consumed by themselves." "That's neat," I said, "but you gave the beast a good shove." "Pfui," he murmured. "A shove was unnecessary. They rushed headlong. I merely refused to be their stage. I wrote it down because it was too good to lose and because I knew in time I'd need reminding. Cases like this don't vanish. They linger in the mind. Every time I'd see a silver tray, I'd remember the duck, the risotto, the pheasant, the tart, the 4 poisoned courses of vanity. And I'd remember Wolfe immovable, dissecting them with words sharper than any knife. Later, after Wolfe had gone upstairs to the orchids, I sat in the office with the window cracked open. The city hummed beyond, hungry as always, chewing through another night. But inside, the brownstone was steady, whole. No trays, no poison, no intruders. Just silence, broken by the ticking of the clock and the faint rustle of orchid leaves above. That's when it struck me. The case hadn't been about food at all. Not really. It had been about hunger in its rawest form. The hunger for praise, for power, for immortality on a printed page. March wanted to write a story that would last forever. Green wanted control that no one could deny. Murillo wanted glory he hadn't earned. Vukovic wanted applause. Harcourt only wanted to cook, and that's why she survived. Wolfe saw it from the start, though he let them believe they were moving pieces. In truth, they were already devoured. The phone rang once more before I turned in. It was Saul, his voice steady as always. "It's done, Archie." Green's accounts frozen. March's column pulled. Murillo singing to save himself. Vukovic's name blackened in every circle that matters. The game's over. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe didn't need the news. He'd already known. But it confirmed what I'd begun to feel. The feast was finished, and all that remained was the aftertaste. When I went upstairs to check in before bed, Wolfe was tending orchids, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he adjusted a bloom. Without looking up, he said, "Archie, man cannot change his nature, but he may restrain it. That is civilization. Those who fail as we saw meet the end of their own making." "Sure," I said, "but in the meantime I'll keep sniffing every plate Fritz sets down." For once Wolfe almost smiled. "That," he said, "is prudent." And that was the end of it. The brownstone was ours again, silent, precise, untouched by vanity's poison. The city would keep feeding its appetites, and men like Green and women like March would rise and fall, devoured by their own hungers. But in here, Wolfe would sit in his chair, orchids above, Fritz in the kitchen and me with my notebook. Cases would come, cases would go, and appetite would always disguise itself in new flavors. But the brownstone would remain, a fortress against trespass where truth was served without garnish. That night I slept easier than I had in weeks. No phone calls, no trays, no whispers of death at the table. Just the hum of the city outside and the deep, steady silence inside. And when morning came, with the smell of Fritz's coffee drifting up and Wolfe already descending for breakfast, I knew the feast of vanity had finally ended. It hadn't been about poison at all. It had been about appetite, and appetite had lost.